Beneath the red lights and green lights and surface-level gore, Squid Game presents a dark question to its audience. Are people inherently evil? It's a question embedded not just in the structure of the games, but in the minds of the men who run them. Both Il-Nam, the architect of the games in Season 1, and In-Ho, the frontman in Season 2, are obsessed with proving this single idea, that humanity is selfish, irredeemable, and will step on each other when the stakes are real. But what is Squid Game's response to this question? How is its critique of capitalism relevant, and where does Gi-Hun fit into all of this? Let's start with the obvious, the games themselves. They were born from a nihilistic philosophy held by Il-Nam, bored, rich, and utterly detached from reality. He and his equally wealthy friends had exhausted every form of material joy and could only find stimulation in the extreme, a bit like finding out your favourite musician is into some weird sex stuff. Il-Nam believes that humanity was fundamentally selfish and flawed, which is why he frequently asks Gi-Hun whether he still believes people are good or worth saving. This belief is what allowed Il-Nam to design the games the way he did. It's what made them such a success, so to say. People rarely voted to leave, and they were quick to betray one another. The games became Il-Nam's legacy, his life's work, anchored in the belief that humanity is irredeemable. Il-Nam used the games to prove this point to In-Ho, who became the front man after competing himself and becoming convinced Il-Nam was right. Both men thought they'd uncovered the truth about humanity, that beneath the surface, people are monsters. To them, the games don't corrupt people, they reveal them. And so, In-Ho carries this ideology forward into Season 2. But Squid Game has a more nuanced message than this. It's no secret that Squid Game is a critique of capitalism. The show explores both ends of the economic spectrum, the deeply impoverished and the absurdly wealthy. It presents us with a wide range of characters, each burdened by overwhelming debt or desperate financial need, whether due to personal mistakes or unfortunate circumstances. At the same time, it shows us a class of people so rich that the only form of entertainment is watching the poor tear each other apart. It's a sharp commentary on the extreme class divide and the staggering wealth gap found in late-stage capitalism. But how does this tie back to our central question, whether people are inherently bad? This is Squid Game offering an alternative theory. Instead of showing people revealing their true selves under pressure and thereby proving that humans are fundamentally bad, perhaps what we're seeing is how human behavior changes when it's forced to operate within a broken system. The games are a metaphor for this idea. The participants' brutal behavior isn't necessarily their true nature. It might just be a natural response to being placed in desperate, dehumanizing circumstances. In the context of the games, this seems obvious. But as Il-Nam points out, didn't all of these people voluntarily choose to return, enticed by the hope of financial salvation? This is the counter-argument posed by the game's creators, and it's central to Il-Nam's and In-Ho's twisted philosophy. Consent. These people consented, so it must be morally acceptable. But Squid Game wants us to think more critically about what consent actually means. Can someone who's been backed into a corner by circumstance truly be said to have consented? Every contestant is a victim of their environment. Yes, some of them are self-inflicted wounds, but even something like addiction complicates the idea of consent and personal responsibility. Others are simply unlucky by their circumstances. So, while the players technically choose to take part in a deadly contest for a shot at riches, did they really have a choice? Or were they simply acting out of desperation? Desperation created by an inherently flawed system. Enter Gi-Hun. He may be the protagonist of the show, but he's also Squid Game's response to the central philosophical question. Gi-Hun represents the idea that people are not inherently bad. At first glance, he seems just as flawed as the rest. Irresponsible, broke, and estranged from his family. He even tries to manipulate Il-Nam in the marble game. But as the story unfolds, we see something different. Again, and again, and again. Gi-Hun chooses empathy over survival. He puts others before himself, even when it costs him himself. By the end of Season 1, his moral compass stands in stark contrast to the worldview of Il-Nam and In-Ho. His compassion is exactly what fascinates them and threatens them. For two men who have built their entire identities around the belief that humanity is selfish and cruel, Gi-Hun is an existential threat. If he's right, then their entire life's work is not only wrong, it's evil. That's why they're so fixated on changing his mind. Il-Nam tries to manipulate him into seeing the world his way with one final test. In-Ho continues the games hoping to prove Gi-Hun wrong. But in both cases, Squid Game sides with Gi-Hun. In Season 1's final moments, a stranger helps a homeless man, not out of obligation, but out of genuine decency. And in Season 3, Gi-Hun sacrifices himself to save a baby, choosing compassion over victory. Gi-Hun even separates himself from In-Ho by choosing not to attack those who want to attack him. These aren't coincidences, they're moral statements. So, are people inherently bad? Squid Game doesn't give us a simple answer, but it absolutely gives us a point of view. While the show critiques capitalism and exposes the brutal realities of poverty, desperation, and exploitation, it also insists that kindness can survive within those systems. Gi-Hun isn't perfect, but he's proof that empathy, even when it costs you everything, is still possible. The games were built to strip people down to their worst instincts, but Squid Game reminds us that context is everything. People don't act immoral because they're inherently flawed. They act immoral because they exist in an inherently flawed system. And sometimes, when given the chance, they still choose to break the cycle.